have a rich Indian heritage on my mother's side of the family. In fact, my 8th great grandmother's name was Rain Crow, and she was among those who were forced to leave their homeland during the Trail of Tears. And just a few days ago, we were talking about this with my grandmother, and we call her Nanny. And I couldn't believe it, but Nanny actually had a picture of Rain Crow, and she sent it to us. So during the Trail of Tears, Rain Crow Dotson and her family, they were moved to the state of Oklahoma, which was where I was born and raised. And even to this day, our home is surrounded by Creek Indians. We actually live in Creek County. And I went to elementary school with many of these. I had many friends that were these Indians. And during the springtime, they would have an annual powwow. Some of you are familiar with that term. And this powwow was about a mile away from our home. But even being that far away, we could still hear them doing their chants and their rituals. And many times this would go on late into the night. And there's an expression, it's an Indian expression that says, keep your ear to the ground. And this comes from a hunting technique of the Indian people. And this is where they would press their ear to the ground so they could hear the distant sounds of buffalo on the move. It was also used to hear the sounds of an enemy on horseback. And so even though nothing was visible on the horizon, nothing could be seen, these warriors had learned to trust what they could hear. So keeping that in mind today, I'd like to draw your attention to 1 Kings chapter 18. And this is the story of Elijah and the prophets of Baal. And we see where the fire had fell from heaven, and it proved that God Jehovah was the one true God. But we've got to keep in mind, this is what I want to draw our attention to. Even after that great victory, the nation of Israel was still in a severe drought. But I love the words of the prophet Elijah in verse 41. And Elijah said unto Ahab, get thee up, eat and drink, for there is a sound of abundance of rain. And Ahab went up to eat and to drink, and Elijah went up to the top of Carmel and cast himself down upon the earth and put his face between his knees. And he said to his servant, go up now, look toward the sea. And he went up and looked and said, there is nothing. And he said, go again 7 times. And it came to pass at the 7th time that he said, behold, there ariseth a little cloud out of the sea like a man's hand. And he said, go up, say unto Ahab, prepare thy chariot, and get thee down, that the rain stop thee not. So in spite of no visible evidence to back him up, Elijah made that prophetic statement that he heard the sound of rain. Now, that's key to our devotion today. He heard the sound of rain. In fact, it says the abundance of rain. And then we read where he goes to the top of Mount Carmel, and scripture said that he cast himself down on the earth and he put his face between his knees. And these are all outward signs that he was in earnest prayer. And I can just see, with that severe drought still ongoing, I can just see the swirl of dust that came around him as he fell to the ground in prayer. And then he tells his servant to go and look for any sign of rain. But when the servant came back, he had some discouraging news. There is nothing. So in essence, the servant is basically saying that prayer you just prayed has done nothing to reverse this drought. Oh, but in my imagination, I can just hear Elijah telling that servant, there may not be any visible evidence right now, but go back and look again, because I still hear the sound of rain. And scripture says it required 7 times of intercessory prayer before the servant came back with news. And that news at that point was just a little cloud, not a big show of evidence, but a little cloud. But we understand that's all Elijah needed to confirm what he already heard in his spirit. And today I want to encourage someone who's going through a spiritual drought. The events of your life, they may have left you in a dry and barren place. And you may have even received some discouraging news that, much like Elijah in verse 43, there is nothing. But listen, even though you may be in a place where all you can see is the dust of discouragement that's swirling around you, this devotion, if you get anything I've said today, I want you to get this. It's time for you to put your spiritual ears back to the ground and listen for the sound of what God's going to do. Again, you may not see it. You may not can see the evidence of what you're praying for. You may have prayed multiple times and you feel like your prayers are not being heard. But can I encourage you today, if you'll put your ears back to the ground, God has showers of blessings reserved just for you. And it may require a prolonged season of prayer like Elijah had to do. But I love the old song that says, until the answer comes, keep on praying. So friend, until your answer comes, keep your ear to the ground and keep listening for the miracle that will come. I promise you, it will come in God's perfect time.